87% of realtors that get into the business get out of the business after 2 years. That does not exist in our world.
We have massive visions around growing our businesses, and we are always looking to add talent to our world. We do everything in our power to ensure the people we surround ourselves with defy the odds, get into production, and build massive lives for themselves.
We have interviewed some of the top realtors in the world. If you're a new realtor, a top producer, or CEO of a mega team, Sales Beast Podcast is your blueprint for success.
With locations all across Canada, reach out to us to talk about partnership and opportunities. We are looking forward to it.
Yes, I'm the boss.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Sales Beast Podcast. We appreciate your support and thank you for joining us today. We're super excited. We're here today with Reed Moore, who is actually my coach's coach, which is kind of cool. I've never had my coach's coach on the podcast before. Anyways, Reed is a hotshot realtor. He took his business from $3 million to $220 million, very reputable within the Keller Williams world. And he's the second person I've ever met. I'm lucky to be in business with someone that we'll say is 90% seventh level, but from what I hear, you're 100% seventh level, which for anyone that doesn't know, that means you own a real estate business, but you don't actually need to show up every day. From what I know about you, Reed, you actually get in trouble if you show up too much.
Yes, that's true.
I remember you mentioning that. So can we backtrack? I see the finished product, which is super cool. Can we backtrack to how you got started? I know you didn't start in the real estate space.
Right. No, I actually was in the military, and through a series of events, I kind of learned that I liked working with people more than I liked working with things. And so that actually ended up kind of sending me down this track of I got my real estate license really to do property management, and property management was not the thing that I loved to do. It was actually quite the opposite. But during that time, I sold a few houses, and I realized, hey, this whole like helping people buy houses and sell houses thing, like that's a good gig for me. I like it. So fast forward, I was in this industry maybe 6 years, and sold maybe $3 million worth of real estate. Didn't really know what was possible in the real estate space. I wasn't really looking because I was doing the work of building people elsewhere in kind of in a church and nonprofit world. And all of a sudden, I ended up in a situation where I had made a couple of bad business decisions, starting up another business that I had no reason to be in, the salon and day spa business, as you can clearly imagine. But that whole misadventure left me $800,000 in debt, which, so when you're in your mid-20s, you've never really made more than maybe $50,000 or $60,000 a year, and you're now $800,000 in debt. It causes you to do some soul searching, right? So I followed kind of a somewhat predictable path of a lot of people that end up being accomplished or successful in business, and that is, I'd like to tell everybody that I made all these really great decisions, and then that led me here. But the reality is that what I built was mostly built out of pain. And pain as a motivator is not something that we necessarily love. And yet it's really powerful. It causes you to do some soul searching and to really figure out what it is that you want out of your life, right? Or out of your business. And in my case, I started realizing that I was really put on this earth to build people, and the place or the bucket or the field of play that I was best at building people was business, and the business I knew was real estate. And so really out of the gate, my real estate career, when I started building it into a team and then to where we are at, it ultimately ended up being real estate as a business that happened to underwrite something bigger for me, which is my desire to build people. And that was kind of the beginning of what became, this big social experiment that's RMG.
But talk to me a little bit about that. I know we all get into business with the purpose of helping our clients buy and sell real estate. And it seems as though a lot of us, as we go through the journey, that often is no longer the mission. Real estate is just a vehicle we use to help ourselves and help those around us get to where we want to go. We've had some people on this podcast very high level realtors that run massive businesses that have told me they don't even enjoy selling homes.
Yeah.
They love building people, and they love building big organizations that provide their people amazing lives.
Yes.
At what point for you did that happen?
So it happened fairly early on that I started understanding that's the direction that I wanted to go. And one of the things I think is important to understand is that regardless of what business you're in, the cliche saying is the business of business is people. And there really is no getting around that, right? Whether you are a manufacturing company, you're an engineering company, or your real estate sales company, ultimately, the only reason that you exist is that you are solving a problem for people, right? Somewhere there is a person that has a better life experience because of what you did. And that's the foundational piece of business. So then the question is, if I go directly to consumer and I serve the consumer directly, is that the highest and best use of my time and talents? And for a lot of people, it is. And that is the right answer. High five. Amazing. Like, you are directly interfacing with clients the same way a heart surgeon is directly interfacing with people, like he's saving their life, right? So in real estate, there can be this idea that if I'm no longer serving the client directly, I'm actually doing this better. And then that's not true. It's like the heart surgeon saying, hey, I no longer perform open heart surgery, even though I'm the best in the world. I coach and encourage other people who are open heart surgeons, right? I can make a case for both of those, right? Because that person might be the best in the world with their hands, and they might be horrible at leading other surgeons and helping those other surgeons service the client, right? So what I started to realize was that I was going to put a bottleneck on my mission to build wealth and wholeness with everyone we serve if I was directly servicing the client, as opposed to servicing leaders who lead other people who service the client. Because if I do that, now the amount of impact that I can make has a greater multiplying effect. And so early on, that I kind of landed on that concept. And then, of course, I was horrible at it. And that's one of the misnomers of anybody who's built anything big. It's they're not smarter. Sometimes they're not even more driven, right? There's just a level of not quitting. And when people want to build a big real estate sales practice, the things that they don't necessarily want to hear, or sometimes the things that we can't hear when we're in that situation, is this is going to suck for 10 years. Right. And people are like, yeah, that's great. I'll do it in 2. It's like, awesome. Like, I'm really excited for you. And I will root you all the way to the bank. And yet, if it takes 10 years, are you going to quit? Right. It's a good question, I think.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed, because I would say I'm a pretty observant person. And there are a lot of people, you being one of them, that I look up to in the real estate space. One's you. I love Jeff Glover. Jeff Cohn's another one we've had on this podcast. I love.
Sure.
Chris Suarez is another one. It seems like 20 years is when you really pop.
Yes.
Which is funny because I don't know what your market's been like over the last few years. I got in 6 years ago. Literally, the only reason I got into this because I thought I could make a lot of money fast. By the time my courses were done, like, oh, for me. But talk to me a little bit about that. This business is incredibly fruitful if you look at it in 5-year, 10-year, 20-year, 30-year increments. Often very disappointing if you're focused within a small window.
Oh my gosh. Well said. Yeah. So I think Phil Knight in his book, Shoe Dog, it took Nike, I want to say it was 16 or 18 years before Nike was, the Nike that we know today. All those people that or that you just mentioned, I love those guys. They're all just phenomenal. Yeah. I'm 21 years in the business this year. Right. So yeah, it's actually 20 years. And I think one of the hard things about that is when you're younger and you're launching your career, you don't ever want anybody to tell you something's going to take longer. Right. And patience is a virtue, and yet you don't see it as a virtue when you're in that season of your life. And I think there's actually some cool things that come along with that. Right. So if somebody was in their young 20s and wanting to launch a real estate career, and they set it in their mind that it was going to take 20 years, they may actually not do the heavy lifting that they need to get it done in 20 years. right? So I think there's kind of a gift of being like, yeah, I'll just do it in 2 years. I'm awesome, right? Because then if you live with that level of intensity and you're humble and you're teachable and you don't give up, then yeah, like 10 years, 15 years down the road, you're going to have something incredible. Because I think it does take a certain amount of ignorance to to build something entrepreneurially, because I don't think it takes 20 years if you don't put in a lot of effort. I think it probably takes 40, right?
Yeah. There was a story I heard, I think I shared this with Anna a while ago. John Wooden, he was the coach of UCLA basketball. I think people consider him to be the best coach of all time.
Sure.
Anyways, what I learned about him was that at one point he wasn't the best coach of all time. He lost 12 or 13 times before he won his first championship, and then he won 7 in a row. So what I've noticed with all of you guys, I'll throw you in that category, your Glovers, Suarez's, Bankinis, they're all John Woodens. Like, I'm just seeing the finished John Wooden today, but you've all dealt with a ton of shit to get there. That's one thing I like about the group at KW. You share that with me. I was just at a Glover conference on leadership a month ago, and I view him as this godlike figure. He's amazing. He's so well spoken. But he almost lost his business at one point because he made some serious mistakes.
There's a certain amount of grit, right? That so I think there's a few things. One is, if early on you can listen to wisdom, and the people who've gone before you, they'll tell you things like start with the end in mind, right? Have a mission. Then there's a whole bunch of other things, but one of the things I think is important is, if you're going to build a career, not just a job, you're going to build maybe something that's more along the lines of legacy, like what Glover's built and Ben and those guys. I think that you have to have a really, really big reason to pull you through all of the really, really crappy times, because there's a lot more hard, crappy times in business than there are the times to celebrate, right? And so that usually is something that's bigger than money, because at a certain point in your career, you will make enough money where money's no longer an issue, right? Like if you're somewhat decent with your money, you're just not going to have to be concerned about that anymore, or you can buy even stupid things on credit and afford the payments. So money is not the issue. So there's this like mission element, and then there's this grit to continue to go. And I think one of the biggest things, kind of speaking to the 7th level, one of the biggest challenges that I've seen is most people that I've talked to that want to go to the 7th level, they want to get out of something more than they want to move towards something. And that's a problem in our life, where anytime we want to get away from something, but we don't want to get to something, we get lost here in the middle. Right? Because getting to a place to where your real estate sales practice is now a business, right? Where you have the ability to live off of the profit. Somebody else is actually running the business and is the CEO or whatever title. To be able to get there, you have to become that kind of person that can do that. And if you think that that's going to get you out of the grind of sales, that's not the case. It's going to get you into the internal grind of 10 years of growing and dealing with your own fears and your own insecurities and your own shortcomings. And like the list goes on and on and on and on. And the reality is if you don't want to do that, stay in sales, because you can mask a lot of that crap, right? Like you don't have to actually do as much work on the man in the mirror.
I love what you just said too. When someone doesn't have something to go towards, but they are trying to run away from something. I see that so commonly with agents that don't want to do lead gen, but then don't have a mission on how they want to build their business. So they get stuck in a place of no activity. And it's so tough to get them out of there. I wanted to go back to something you said earlier too. So you talked about when you were deciding to make the mission to move forward on helping people improve their lives, that it became like a bottleneck to make a decision on how to move forward. So what was there, like a turning point, or how did you realize that was what you wanted to do? Do you wanted to move forward and focus on the business of people and not necessarily of real estate?
Yeah. So I started realizing that my skill set of developing people really requires more close quarters, long-term relationships. And so I would have these relationships with buyers and sellers, and a lot of them became lifetime clients. But we would have these brief interactions where I would serve them and I would help them, and they would call and ask, and I would answer questions. But ultimately, I actually wasn't developing them, and I wasn't helping develop their families. Right? It was the best part, the best side of transactional, but still transactional. And so I started realizing that the things that I'm particularly skilled in require what I actually call organizational leadership. So I love leadership. I love the conversation about leadership. I'll talk all day about leadership. But some of the older ways of thinking about leadership, I think I'd like to challenge. One is, John Maxwell, who's I'm a huge fan of. He says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And I think that that's wonderful. I still think that definition is accurate. The challenge for us in business is that if you are just influential, or you're a great speaker, or you're a great coach, all of those kind of things, you're actually not responsible for the outcome of your influence, which is a whole different dynamic of having to grow and mature. So what I mean by that is if you have a family, you don't show up at home so I have a wife and 4 kids. You don't show up at home and hey, I'm the rock star. I'm going to give you the 3 reasons that this is better than that. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. Right? That's not how it works at home. Right? They get to see, will you, does the audio match the video? They get to see you day in and day out, sucking sometimes, being really good other times, being, they get to see all of that stuff. And so in business, organizational leadership is this skill that requires the leader to sacrifice a lot of times their freedom, right? Because you're the one who, instead of having all the freedom around your calendar, is the one who chooses to be a slave to your calendar for the sake of modeling that for other people who are not going to get there without that skill, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I started realizing that my skill set was around building people, and that required consistency, now it sent me down this whole path of learning what it means to be an organizational leader, which means learning how to not just be influential, but deal with all the consequences and the fallout and the good stuff of influencing other people, and then continuing to walk with them through it.
Thank you for that answer. I think that really opened up my eyes. And one thing that I wanted to relate back what you said to, I think influence tends to fall along the same lines of ego. And when you're becoming an organizational leader, like you just mentioned, I think you need to put that ego and leave that ego at the door, and not allow that to be how you move forward in your relationships, how you move forward in your business. And so when you're thinking about your ego, how did you make that transition from me go to we go with your team?
Yeah. So I had a few moments of clarity kind of early on, and then through that time. And one of them is, we're all emotional. And yet when we can choose to be logical and then play that out, it typically goes better. And one of the areas that I think that we have a tendency to be emotional around actually is our ego. And if you decouple that, people will just say it's my ego. Am I right? Just kind of it's okay, well, let's maybe interrogate that and just say, okay, so Mike, what about your ego is serving you, and you really need to protect it because your future depends on it? Hard question to answer well, I think. So then what happens, I say, okay, so if I look at my ego and it's not serving me, it's not serving others, it's not serving the mission, and it's constantly getting me in trouble, what is the reason I'm protecting it? Right? And all of a sudden, early on, I realized, well, if my ego can be off the table, it can be off the menu. My ego and fear can no longer have a voice in the conversation. What am I able to do? And it turns out you can do a lot more if your ego is off the table, right? You walk into a situation where you knew you blew it, and instead of using your sales skills to tell somebody why you really didn't blow it, you just say, I really messed that up, right? And then deal with your own emotional blowback from keeping your ego in check. That was a really big, kind of early on thing that it was a little light bulb that went off. And you could ask the people that work with me whether or not that's real. But I'd like to say it is.
I believe that, well, like, I think that the definition of ego is like your self-confidence and your self-esteem and how you show up. So like, there's definitely like a really positive aspect to that, because in becoming a leader, you need to be able to have a mission and vision and get people to buy in and, follow you. But then it can play really negatively if you're not letting go of that ego in the times that you need to.
Yeah. So there's, I think there's this is so geeky, I apologize, but there is a disorder so for some of us, our mission underwrites our ego. And for others, the ego underwrites the mission. So what I mean by that is if my mission stands alone and it has value apart from me, then other people can grab a hold of that mission, they can make it their own, and they can go. But if the mission really is actually tied to my ego and it's really intertwined with my ego, then I would say that my ego serves me. But it's actually, I still don't think it's the ego serving. I think it's the mission. It's just too intertwined with my ego, right? Because one of the ways of thinking about this, maybe a little bit sadistic, is I could actually look in the mirror and tell myself, I'm actually not good enough. I'm not smart enough. If people knew all of the stupid ideas I've had, they wouldn't follow me. And I'm going to do it anyway because I have a mission and I've been called to this mission. And so somebody is underwriting the fact that I am qualified, if that makes sense, right? So that's kind of a weird way of looking at it. But again, it's, somebody looks at me and is like, hey, you're horrible. I can't believe you built a business. Like, you are so the worst. I'm like, well, but I did it. Right. I'm like, well, I'm moving forward. Sorry that messes with your mind, but like, I totally agree with you, but it still is happening. So
would you say putting yourself in a position where the ego doesn't underwrite the mission is one of the most essential steps you took to getting to 7th level, to a position where you don't need to be there every day, and you have other amazing people that run things, not only run things, but grow your business?
I think so. And one of the reasons is that if you're going to grow something, then ultimately you're going to step out of everything that strokes your ego, right? So you get to the place to where you are like the best listing agent, right? But now you have to make room for your successor. That means you're going to wake up one day and you're no longer going to be able to have your identity tied to being the best listing agent. And that's going to really suck. And by the way, it did, right? And now you're the CEO of your company with all of the, the accolades that come with that, and all the decision making and all of that stuff. And to some extent, the freedom. And now you have somebody who needs that opportunity because of their growth. And now you've just gotten good at being the CEO of your company. Like, you're finally actually making really good business decisions consistently. And now somebody else is actually coming along the line, and you've helped them grow, and they're actually better than you. Well, what are you going to do? Like, if somebody inside of your business is better than you at running your business, you're either going to set your ego aside, or you're going to push that person out sideways, right? And I don't know that there's another way to do that.
You mentioned word their identity, and I noticed the same thing. Like, there was a point in time where I got to go up on stage and I had to do all that fun stuff and get awards, and I had never had that. I was never good at anything in my life other than selling homes, and it felt amazing. But then one day it all went away. And I was put in this role where I was starting at the very bottom, and I knew nothing. And it was really hard on me. I almost got depressed in a way. Oh, now that you, like, based on what you just said, you know you're going to be put in that position over and over and over and over again. What are some of the tools you use to push your old identity to the side and start building a new one?
It's a really good question. So I have a fundamental kind of like underwriting in my belief system. And so my belief system is foundation. Like the foundation is I'm a Christian, right? So that is kind of a worldview system that underwrites a lot of my thinking. One of the ways that I've learned to think about this is that there's a difference between success and accomplishment, and I've gotten really clear on the difference. So accomplishment literally means doing something, right? I set out to do something and I do it. And it's very, very easy to think that accomplishment is success, because what I would say success is becoming who you're created to become. And the interesting thing about this is that who I was created to become shows itself sometimes in my accomplishments. But if I get tied to the accomplishment, then I tether my identity to it. And so what happens is you have people in our industry, and maybe all industries, that are incredibly accomplished and miserable and addicts and, fill in the blank. And from the outside looking in, you're like, wow, look at how successful you are. Well, that may not be success you're seeing, it's accomplishment. So what happens is you accomplish becoming the best listing agent. And then you accomplish being the CEO, you accomplish being the team leader, you accomplish these things. And all along the line, you get celebrated for those accomplishments. Well, in the bigger picture, maybe you're actually growing to who you were created to become. And anytime I look backwards and see that accomplishment and see my identity tethered there, it's actually keeping me from getting here, right? So I think a more healthy way of looking at it is to, like, you're walking across the stage and you stop in that moment and you have a deep moment of gratitude. Man, this is awesome. I'm so grateful that people recognize all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into me being here. And I wonder what's next in my process of becoming who I was created to be. So that way I can do something, and instead of being tethered to it, I can now use it as a new foundation for whatever's next. Right. So that's the mental game that I play with myself.
Yeah, it sounds like the journey is way more important than the destination. I know that sounds corny or cheesy, but it's so important, and we tend to get away from it because we're just thinking about the next thing, what's the next listing, the next client, the next team member that we can onboard. And I really like how you put it, success versus accomplishment. Which one are you looking for? I don't know if Mike had a question. I feel like he may have had a question. I just wanted to ask you kind of a different style of question. What are some of the big failures that you had as you started building towards 7th level? I'd love to hear some of the mess ups, some of the pieces that helped you learn a lot throughout the way.
It was all perfect. There was roses and unicorns and rainbows. There's actually not any of that. So some of my earlier issues are going to be the same issues that a lot of people are going to have, and that is that you are dividing your focus and you're not really doing anything well when you start really pressing into building your business. And I hired the best I knew how to. We followed the process of hiring really since the beginning, but you're not going to be very good at hiring. And so what's going to happen is you're going to hire some good people, and they're really going to have your back, and you're going to look back and realize you really messed a lot of things up and other people kind of covered your tracks. And then you're going to have other people, and they're going to expose that, and they're going to create problems, right? And so early on, one of the things that I did is I was always told, you're always looking to hire your replacement. You're not just looking for another agent, you're looking for the next you, right? And so you'll hear that early on, you're like, yeah, I get it. And then you won't do it, right? So the very first thing that I was told was, you don't go out and hire agents, you get your executive assistant first. That's the first hire. I said, great, totally makes sense. Then I went out and hired an agent first. And then I realized how stupid that was, and I had to backfill. And so I created that problem right out of the gate. And then as I went, I was, growing people, but what would happen is that I left gaps in my organization. So one of the first gaps was I did a pretty good job replacing myself, but I didn't cast the vision or help the person that replaced me replace themselves. So then there was a sales gap inside the organization. And so there was probably 10 years where I accidentally kept leaving gaps in the organization. And it's like, okay, well, that sounds hard. When you leave a gap in a sales organization, you leave a gap in your sales compared to your expenses. And that's where the big failures were, is as long as it took me, I moved sometimes too fast. And as a result of that, I would have somebody who would be a lead listing agent, and they would move into leadership, and now there were no lead listing agents behind them. And so now, we just advanced the company and dropped $500,000 of revenue in the same stroke. And so I kind of kept making that mistake over and over again. And that was a big one. Another one is, a mistake I learned actually from getting in debt that I haven't repeated super often, is it is so tempting to go the field of dreams route. And, if you build it, they will come. And so much about building a business is about saying no to new ideas, shiny things, new lead systems. I see people do this all the time. They want to jump from one CRM to another CRM because this one will finally do what they need it to do or provide better leads. And really, if you went back and you audited what they did, they only used 10% of their existing system, right? Their speed to lead was horrible. They didn't follow up, and now they're going to make this new move. And so I've learned over the years that every time that I haven't really interrogated reality around the decision I've made, that it's cost me a huge amount of money. And there's a big list, right?
Expensive, but sometimes necessary lessons, right?
Oh yeah. I've lost millions of dollars over the last 15 years, millions of dollars making stupid decisions, like leaving gaps in the sales process, going after shiny tech things, not holding expenses accountable, early on, not even knowing how to hold expenses accountable, right? So many of those decisions throughout the years, and you get better and better and better at those things as long as you're willing to continue to grow.
I have a question for you. I've done the same thing, moved someone along too quickly. What do you do to avoid that at this point? So yeah, you have a person, they obviously contributed to your organization, they're ready for their next opportunity. How do you ensure that their replacement is ready to continue to crank out the 500,000 as you mentioned?
Such a good question. It falls to two things. One is accountability, but actually systematic, structured accountability. And the second thing, it depends on, which is a big skill to learn and to continue to master, is succeeding through other people, not around them. And so let's say I have this person behind me and they want my job. And quite frankly, they looks like they're probably better at it than I am, or they want to rise up in the organization. Well, the first thing is that I'm going to set a plan, a systematic plan of accountability, which is, okay, if you want this to happen, here are the things that you need to do to get here. Okay, that's the thing we always think of. The second piece is, in order for you to step up in this leadership direction, you have to prove your leadership by actually backfilling yourself. Because if you can't replace yourself as a leader, then you're going to leave a gap in the organization, which ultimately, we're going to have a problem. And so there's this idea of, here's what you need to do to get to this point. But then here's what you need to be able to do to fill the role behind you. And now I'm going to be strictly holding them accountable and coaching them to that process, and not being the one who hires their replacement and trains their replacement for them. Right. That's another challenge that I see a lot. I'm trying to think I don't think we've actually had this challenge as much, but I see it a lot. And that is that people are really talented and they get elevated into leadership positions, but they don't have the scars to have earned it. And that sounds so terrible to look at somebody and say, hey, Anna, like you are so talented, but like, I don't see the scars. And I actually need you to go get like roughed up. Right. It's like, and I love you, like I promise. But the reality is that when somebody doesn't replace themselves, they haven't learned that struggle. They haven't failed at it over and over and over again, and then looked in the mirror and asked themselves the question, man, am I actually willing to do this? Because for you, it's really important that you know now that person actually wants the opportunity, but they're not willing to pay for it. Right. And so all along the line, you need your leaders in your organization to have the battle scars, right? So it's kind of like if you ever read any of the books by any of the Navy SEALs, Jocko and there's Ryan, there's a bunch of them. But there's this big gap in the Navy SEALs, and that is there was a whole generation of trainers and people that actually never went to war. Like they just did, they had the books, they had the knowledge, but they didn't actually experience it. And so when you hear somebody who's been to war talking about the principles of war, like you can tell, like there is gravity to the words. And when you hear somebody talk about it in theory, like what I could do, it's neat and it sounds good. It all makes sense, but there's no gravity to it. So building that gravity into that through accountability, I think is important.
I love that. I love how you talked about scars. And I find I used to have this thought. I would see all these amazing, successful business owners and wonder how do they pull that off? There's so much on their plate. If you were to take what's on their plate and put it on my plate, it would absolutely crush me. Now that I have some more time in the business, I think that's all it is. They're far more calloused. They've had to deal with a lot more adversity than me, hence why they can overcome what seem like massive issues to me.
I think that's 100% accurate.
It's almost like I view this now. I'm the happiest in my business in my life today that I've ever been. And the big shift I had, it came from Anna, actually. I literally just view the business as a tool for personal development. The same way I can go spend 10 grand to watch Tony Robbins. Here I can do it not for free. It costs me a lot, but I get so much more out of it. And you really just cemented that in my brain in the last 15 minutes. I think if realtors, team leaders, or any business owner just view their business as an opportunity to grow themselves and become that person that they were meant to be, there's so much more satisfaction. You can truly enjoy the journey.
It's really the way it is with so many things in life, right? You have a long, healthy marriage or kids. Kids are so hard, and they just there's so much personal growth that is available out of that. Business is the same way, and so if you look at it, and by the way, a lot of us do what we do because of the challenge. Sometimes we act like we don't want a challenge, but we would be bored out of our mind, right? So you see the Ben Kinneys and Chris Suarez and Adam Hergenrother and all these guys. Like I know them personally, and I know they've flat out suffered more than I have, right? So now, what's their personal growth opportunity? Same as you and me, and that is to get callous, but not to get hard. Right? To not get bitter and not get resentful and all of those things. So then that takes you down this whole other personal growth path, and it's all a gift.
Yeah. I saw you were on Adam's podcast. I listened to that one quite a bit.
Oh, cool.
It almost seems like he puts in place this self-imposed pain. Like I've heard of him climbing mountains in Vermont. And it's almost like a David Goggins-esque thing.
Oh yeah.
Do you do anything like that in your life to prepare yourself to go to war every single day and deal with what you do?
I've done Ironman. I've done 7 or 8 different Ironman events, not as many as Adam has, and done some what do you call it? Some endurance, like mental endurance training, and some just really, really uncomfortable things. and it's good, right? It helps you. Comfort's a problem, right? I love comfort. Like I love the easy chair. I love like, laying in bed, watching TV, all of that stuff. And it does nothing good for me, right? Like comfort's not a good place for pit bulls or realtors, I guess.
Yeah.
I was literally having this conversation today with Sandy, our business partner, and we were talking about conflict. Very much the same conversation. Like most of us naturally as humans, we want to avoid conflict, so we run away from it. And same with any kind of challenge, we want to run away from it. But in fact, like the best thing to do for you, for the people around you, is to face things head on. And it sounds like that's what you and the people in your world are doing, is facing things head on so that you can be prepared in the face of any kind of adversity that comes your way.
Yeah, that's the deal. And, of course you'll end up failing at that and give into fear, and then you have to recalibrate and do it again. But ultimately the mission, or, the reason that you're doing something creates this tractor beam. And if you're actually, no kidding, sold out to the mission, like I am going to become who I was created to be, and I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do in this world as a result, then I really only have one good option, which is to go forward and push through whatever personal growth is necessary to me to get on the other side of this pain. And that's just going to require going through the pain of personal growth, which is better than the pain of regret. So, and it seems like you probably just have to choose those two, and they're your options.
What is, getting close to the end here, what is the next path of pain and growth you're going to pursue?
Good question. So we have just a tremendous culture inside of our company, and kind of true to the mission, I need that culture to continue to grow and to impact more and more and more people. And so what we're embarking on now is really being able to figure out how to underwrite other people's real estate sales businesses with our systems and our culture, without them having to really become a part of our company, right? Because again, like our company, our name of our company, it's kind of irrelevant. The mission's what matters. And so we're working on figuring out, how do we bring this to more and more and more people, and underwrite more and more people's success, help them to have what they need to break through in their lives and in their business. And so that's stretching us and helping us figure out, like, how do we do that in the real estate space. So that's the next big challenge for me.
That's amazing. What does that look like? Is it expansion but less involved?
Yeah. So do you remember back in the day when we used PCs? I don't know if anybody still uses a PC. I'm a Mac guy now. But I remember on every laptop that I got, it had a little sticker and it said Intel inside.
I'm looking at it right here.
Yeah. Okay, you're a PC guy. Which is fine. Yeah, so it's really interesting, right? So all of that technology, all of the stuff of your Dell or HP or whatever your laptop is, it has this chip inside that's the processor. That's the thing that causes all of the other complexities to work. And it turns out that there's a company, and that's just what they do, and they do a really great job at it. And so that's actually what it looks like, I think. Right. And that's the growth thing, is like trying to figure this out and get to clarity of, what does it look like if we have the ability to go to your business, underwrite your business. Like, look, we don't need to have our name on we don't need to be Dell. We don't need to be HP, but we have some things we're really great at and have, suffered enough to build over the last 15 years, that we think we can actually just plug this in and help you build everything else that you want to build. Right.
If you come to Canada, I'd love to talk about putting your Intel logo on my PC.
Awesome. I appreciate that.
And
I also, yeah, I was just going to say, I know we want to do a quick plug before we let you go. So tell us a little bit about RMG training and coaching. Yeah.
So another way that I am able to serve people in our industry is, if somebody is building their real estate company, they're going to need to grow their leadership, and they're going to need to have an organization that is healthy, right? So like the behavior, the the conflict, the ability to build with and through other people needs to be healthy. And so what I specialize in really is helping people grow and scale their businesses. And a lot of that comes down to their ability to lead effectively, to be able to bring talented people into their world, and to be able to have an incredible culture, not just like, we have Taco Tuesdays, but actually a deep-seated, mission-oriented culture. So, so inside our company, we focus on organizational health and leadership, and help people grow through those two mediums. And then, of course, just good business practices.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And as we start wrapping things up, we always ask every single guest the same question. So we'd like to ask you, Reed, who do you know that we should know that should be on SalesBeast podcast?
Oh my gosh. My CEO, Annie Bjerkestrand, is somebody that you should have on the podcast. And the reason is that she is one of the most phenomenal organizational leaders I've ever met. She's far better than I am. And she is the person that actually runs the company that does the $200+ million a year in sales. So she would be the one.
Unreal. We'll have to get her on. We got to say thank you. It's been so great. I think I really needed this conversation today. I wrote down like 3 pages of notes, and I'm ready to take some action. So thank you again, Reed, for being on the podcast with us today.
Awesome. My pleasure. Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Every day I'm hustling, every day I'm hustling, every day I'm hustling, every day